Welcome to Third and Fairfax, the official podcast of the Writers Guild of America West. I'm your host, Brian Gary. In this episode, host Josephine Green Zhang talks with filmmaker Megan Park about her latest film, the coming-of-age comedy, My Old Ass. They discuss Megan's transition from acting to writing and directing, finding her authentic voice, and much more. Listen and subscribe to Third and Fairfax on Spotify, Apple, or Libsyn, and watch us on the Writers Guild of America West YouTube channel. And now, here's Josephine.
I'm so glad you're here. I'll do a quick intro. Everybody, this is Josephine Green Zhang. I'm Josephine Green Zhang, and we're at Third and Fairfax podcast. Today we have writer-director Megan Park, whose new feature, My Old Ass, is coming out. I want to be like, this old ass? No, My Old Ass is coming out. My Old Ass, I'll do a quick log line, is about an 18-year-old Elliot who, on her birthday, trips on mushrooms with her friends and meets her 39-year-old self, who gives her advice on how to live and avoid heartbreak for her future life. That's sort of it, but welcome, Megan. You can do your version, Megan.
They've asked me to write log lines for this so many times. And it's a really tough one to write a log line for without giving away too much. But I just think it's hilarious that the title is, I was like, no one's going to let me keep the title My Old Ass. Like when I made it for myself as I was writing it, I was like, surely somewhere along the line, someone's going to ask that. And it's so thrilling to me to hear you say My Old Ass, because part of me was like, tee-hee, this is just so funny that like lawyers are going to have to be like, here's your My Old Ass contract to sign. And it's going to be an official, on posters and stuff. And here we are. And it still has the same title, which I don't know how immature that is. And I think that's pretty cool. But yeah, I guess the movie it's a coming of age film about a girl from Canada who, yes, she's turning 18. It's her birthday. She does mushrooms and she meets her 39-year-old, old ass. And this old ass gives her some advice, played by Aubrey Plaza. And this older version of herself gives her information about the future, which she's not sure she is in love with and not sure she's going to be able to follow. Kind of sends her on a bit of a tailspin. And then there's some drama and hopefully hilarity ensues.
It's such a beautiful, heartwarming film. So much about the passage of time. It was just such a pleasure to watch. And of course, there's hilarious moments and just a lot of poignancy. Can you talk a little bit about how you came up with the concept? And you said coming of age, but would you say any other genres mixed in there with this film as well?
It's interesting because it is a coming of age movie, but at the same time, it's been really wonderful to see how it's sort of become this sport quadrant, resonating with lots of different age ranges, especially women who are sort of more in this old ass category that we like to call it, which is, my age, especially after spending the whole shoot and the summer with a bunch of 18-year-olds. I was like, oh yeah, I'm definitely on the old ass end of the spectrum. I am for sure middle age in their eyes. But yeah, I think it's been really cool to see that it's more of a heartfelt movie than we anticipated it was going to. When you're writing something, making something in the edit, the movie changes so much. But it's really hitting people in a very heartfelt way. And I would say that it's not a straight comedy. A lot of people are expecting that from the title and the poster, but it's got a lot of heart to it. And it's very much older asses movie. And it's her older coming of age too. It's not just about, the typical tropes of what an 18-year-old would go through at all.
Well, let's go back. Where are you from? And how did you get into writing and directing and let's start with your whole journey.
The whole journey. I grew up in Canada. I grew up not far from where this movie was made, which is Muskoka, just north of Toronto in Ontario. But nobody in my family was in the industry at all. My dad was a dentist. My mom was a teacher. So I didn't know that, writing, directing movies was even a thing. I also didn't have a TV in my house growing up. But my parents took us to tons of theater and, we'd go to Toronto to see like the ballet and things like that. So I think that when you're interested in the arts when you're younger and you're from a small town, going to a theater camp, performing is sort of the entryway into that kind of world. So that's what I did. I just really enjoyed theater, and I would do local plays and things like that. And then I got really lucky and I started working out of Toronto. I did some movies there. And then I auditioned for this TV series called The Secret Life of the American Teenager, which was like, ABC Family's at the time first scripted series, I think, ever. And it went for 7 seasons. I mean, we shot over 120 episodes. So that brought me down to LA and to the States and got me a green card and all those kind of crazy things that are a big deal for a Canadian. And I loved it. I really enjoyed doing the show and doing movies and stuff, but it always felt like there was something that wasn't totally clicking for me. Like I was fulfilled, but not in the way that I would sometimes see my coworkers be and sort of be like fighting to get. I always remember Shailene Woodley, who was on the show with me when she auditioned for that movie, The Descendants, the Alexander Payne movie that really broke her. She was just like, I'm going to get this part. She was so driven, and she was, they said no to her the first time and she was like, I'm going back in. And I remember being like, wow, she really wants this part. And she really loves acting. Like she just loves acting so much. And I remember being a little bit embarrassed because I was like, I don't feel that way about acting, but it's what I do. And I'm having some success at it. So there was a little bit of like, I don't know, guilt around that. And then when you're on a show too, the writers and directors coming through, it's not always the most creative environment for them. Like it's not like each director gets to come in and do whatever they want with it's like it can be on some shows, but it wasn't necessarily on that show. So I didn't really have a lot of experience or didn't think that writing and directing was, I don't know, something that I wanted to do anyway. And it wasn't until I worked with a young writer and director who was also an actor who I really admired. And she was sort of like, I think you should, I was like pitching her an idea I had for a show. She was like, why don't you just do it? Like you could write it, you know what you're doing. But I was like, I didn't go to film school. Like I didn't go to writing school. I definitely can't do that. She was like, fuck it, just do it. Like you've been on set your whole life. You know what you like and what you don't like. Just give it a go. And I think just because I idolized her so much, I was like, okay. And I wrote a pilot, a 30-minute pilot that CBS actually ended up buying and not making. And that was the first thing I'd ever written. And it was about like a child star who smoked a ton of weed. And it was really fun. And I learned so much through that process. And it was almost the second that I quite literally figured out how to use Final Draft. It was like everything I'd ever learned in front of the camera, from reading endless amounts of scripts and auditioning for hundreds of thousands of things. It all made sense in a way that acting never had. It was like, oh, this is what I love. And then after doing some writing, I took the leap to directing, and it was like, okay, yeah. Like this clicks for me in that way that feels right. And now I'm like, I will never not be writing or directing. Like this is, I'll be I don't miss acting at all yet, I will say. And acting in my own projects sounds like a personal nightmare. That doesn't sound fun to me at all. I don't think I would ever act in my own projects, but maybe, I don't know. It was a part of my life for so long, but I really love the writing process of everything.
That's amazing. And so, okay, so I did a little homework, and I know you had a short film.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it would be so impressive if I like had it on my like the tip of my head. But I know it was like about a young woman who's on the like eve of getting married, and it's like talking with her 6-year-old self.
Yeah.
And you made that in 2017.
Yeah.
Was that your first foray into writing and direct, or maybe you had done things before, but that was like, can you talk about the genesis of that?
Yeah, ironically, like a little thematically, it was very different, but kind of explored the same things that this movie would later become, I guess, in a sense. But no, I'd been writing for a while already, and I'd been directing separately. I'd been doing some like commercials and music videos and things like that, but that was sort of my first like combining them both together. And I was like, oh, I love this so much. Like this, it was scary because it was like all me, like something I'd written and directed. And then very quickly after that was when I started putting together The Fallout, which was the first feature length thing that I'd ever written besides TV stuff. Yeah.
What was your short called
The
again?
short was called Lucy in My Eyes.
Lucy in My, okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Can we see it online or is it not available?
I don't think it's even online, actually. We took it to the Austin Film Festival and we won the grand jury prize, which was kind of nuts.
Yeah.
But no, I know I should put it up somewhere. It's kind of just been like in the archives, but because it's sort of like, what do you do with a short? But it was a great leap for me though. Like it was cool within the industry, people who saw it. It really gave me a leg up with people kind of trusting me to go ahead and make The Fallout, I think, even though, because that movie, it was $1 million movie, which at the time I was like, oh my gosh, that's so much money to make a movie. And then The Fallout was $1 million. Yeah. Which, I sort of was able to get, I think because I had done the short and because I'd done some bigger music videos and commercials and stuff, it helped me be able to get somebody to finance the film. And I thought, wow, $1 million, like the possibilities are endless to make this movie, but quickly realized that's not a lot of money to make a movie. But we made it happen. It was a 3-week shoot and a 3-week edit. It was insane.
So fast.
Which I thought was normal, but.
So The Fallout came out in 2021 at South by, right?
Yeah.
It played at South by Southwest. And that was your first feature. And so My Old Ass is your second feature. Can you talk a little bit about the transition or like your experience with The Fallout and then after like coming out with that and then transitioning to My Old Ass too?
They were totally different experiences start to finish because we made the movie in September 2020. It was like peak pandemic, pre-vaccine. So it was like, thank God I'd been on a film set and felt so comfortable on a set because if that had been my first time ever directing or anything, it would have been really scary because I was like in a back room talking on a walkie with monitors. It was very like face shield mask sort of days on set. So it was not like I think I hugged Jenna for the first time, like when we saw each other a few months after the movie. Like it was that kind of vibe on set, just because of COVID. And so it was a very unique experience. And we couldn't film nights because at the time they weren't doing permits to film at night because of police availability. It was a very, very strange time. And then again, going to the festival, it was all remote. I got a phone call from the festival director and she was like, you won the grand jury prize and you won the directing award and you won the audience choice award and congratulations. And I was like, oh my gosh, thank you. And then hung up the phone and that was sort of it. And I still to this day have never seen that movie with an audience in a theater, which is so weird. And then the same thing, we got a call, HBO Max wants to buy your movie. And it was thrilling, obviously, but everything just was so remote and distant that it felt very real, but also very not real. Like it almost didn't happen in a very strange way. And with this movie, it was totally different. I remember was going to Sundance and was like, oh, you did the film festival thing with The Fallout. Like and I was like, yeah, but not really. Like this is really a totally different situation. And to actually sit in a theater with that many people and watch the movie, it's way more vulnerable than The Fallout was in a strange way. It felt very real and very visceral and scary, but has been so rewarding and so thrilling. And part of me was like, oh, fuck, there's obviously a lot of worse things going on in the world, but it would have been so cool to experience that at South by. But we've talked about, we're like, oh, maybe we can like put together a screening of the movie with the cast now that of The Fallout. But yeah, I mean, and same thing with making this movie. It was a very different experience. We were up at a lake town and we were all hanging out on the weekends and boating to dinners and getting to really dig in to the material together in person, face to face, which was amazing. And it was a much more relaxed environment than The Fallout and a very different tone of a movie to make. So it was very different experience and both were incredibly rewarding, but very, very, very different.
Definitely. It's so funny that year of South by, some of my friends too, because the festival had to be canceled, it was all online.
The first year, right?
Yeah. And so one of my friends, Maureen Barucha, she directed a film called The Golden Arm, and then they just played it at Vidiots, like
No
2 weeks
way.
ago. Yeah, yeah. And they played it at Vidia's, which is over in Eagle Rock. Great theater, women own, like run,
Yeah.
just like I have some of their. I feel like I'm like doing a commercial for them. But it was such a great experience to see the cast and crew, and it was sort of this like 4 years later you
That's
got to
so
like
cool.
experience. So I just like, oh my gosh, I wish that for you and your cast, Megan.
Let's
So
soft pitch it to them. That would be so cool. Yeah, no, a few people have been like, wait, we have to make that happen and get the cast all together. And I would love that. And we've talked about it. The cast, we're like, oh, we would be so great to do that. So
yeah.
maybe, yeah, we'll put it out in the universe.
Put on the it was very healing. I wasn't even on the crew and I was like, this is such a healing just to be here experience. But I love you talking about your experience shooting To My Old Ass. It's funny because I've like I read some Carly Fortune recently, who is like this like romance series. She's
Oh yeah,
Canadian as
yeah.
well.
And she writes movies up in that area all the time.
Yeah, I just read like my oh gosh, Every Summer After. I think I just
Oh yeah,
started this
yeah.
series. So I'm like, okay, there's like a vibe, there's something in the zeitgeist, my old ass, like Every Summer After. Let's like bring lake girl summer romance. Like
I know. I'm
have
like, I need to meet this woman. Like we've so many of the same. I know, and I think her cottage is in Barry's Bay because she's always put. I follow her on Instagram, which is more Kawartha Lakes, but yeah, similar vibe.
yes, yes. So like I'm loving that there's these stories. Can you talk a little bit about so this had you grew up in that area, so the development of this beautiful coming of age story with some romance in it. Like, how long from start to finish was the script? How many drafts? Like, when did you like? What gave you the idea to come up with the like magical realism or
Mhm.
fantasy element of it? Just really love to hear your genesis to like the
Yeah.
final, what the end.
Well, it came together. I mean, from a logistical standpoint, so quickly. I think I had the movie, The Fallout came out. I think it was like February or something, and then in March I had a general meeting with Lucky Chap because they'd seen the movie, and then I log lined. All I'd been thinking about at that point was sort of just this nostalgic feeling of wanting to go back in time and talk to your younger self or older self, or kind of the last time you ever do, like, which turned into a scene in the movie with Chad where he's talking about the last time you like, ride your bikes with your friends and you don't know it's the last time. It was sort of that feeling was sort of the initial jumping off point for the movie. But as a writer, I'm still figuring myself out. But for the Fallout and for Mild Ass, what was similar is that it all comes from like a really like emotional place first. I never outline anything. I don't know where it's. I open up Final Draft. I'm like page one. Like I really figure it out as I go, which now I know is not always how people work, and maybe not the most professional way to do it, but it just works well for me. And so before I even put pen to paper, I just kind of think about sort of the feelings I have around it. I figure out who these characters are in my head, and what their relationship is to each other, all in my head. I don't take down any notes or voice notes. I'm just sort of thinking about it a lot. Um, and then when I finally do open it up, it's usually flows pretty quickly because I spent so much time thinking about it, but it's just as much a surprise for me how, where it ends up. It's a very therapeutic kind of like personal process for me. In fact, Maisie always jokes because I feel like I kind of just black out. Like a lot of times I'll listen to like rap music or I'll put on headphones and just kind of literally it's like 7 hours. It's like that feeling when you're driving somewhere and you get there, you're like, wait, how the fuck did I get here? It's sort of similar to that feeling for me writing. Especially because I had to rewrite the entire old ass and young ass thing once we cast Aubrey because the character was much older. So we'd already started filming, and I had like one night after filming, I had 7 hours to sort of rewrite that scene, which was really long. It's like a 10-minute long scene. And I just sort of blacked out and did it. And I remember the next morning, Maisie was reading the pages on set while we were filming something else behind me. And she was like laughing and crying. And I was like, does it make any sense? She was the first person I sent it to because I had no idea sort of what I'd written. She was like, yes, I love it. It works. I can't believe you just blacked out and did this. So it's kind of a funny process for me, but it took me about, I would say a month and a half to get my first draft together. And then honestly, the first draft didn't change that much. I mean, I did tons of tweaking once we started casting specifically, because I like to really sort of, instead of forcing a square peg in a round hole, it's like find the right person for a character and then kind of tweak it, the writing around that person and what they bring to it. So I did a lot of revisions once I had cast everybody. And then once I got to the location and it's like, oh, you can't actually make A, B, and C happen out on the water. It's like, okay, fuck that. I have to come up with a new idea. So there was a lot of tweaks that had to happen for logistical reasons, but the core of the initial story and the core of the initial draft didn't change that much. But yeah, I mean, there was probably like 10 revisions just in terms of in a smaller scale way. But I mean, I didn't even know that. Well, I can't give away that giveaway was, but yeah, I didn't. The mushroom thing even came to me later. It was just sort of like, what's the entry point into this? That wasn't like the first idea I had to sort of get into the story.
And then once you had the script and so the casting process was a part of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I had loved the show Nashville, so I didn't even recognize her at first. Honestly, I had to be like, "What? Like, there's a Vanity Fair article. It's Macy Stella, right?"
Yeah.
And just seeing her all grown up and really inhabit that role. Can you talk a little bit about the casting process and how you
Yeah.
found your stars? It's just such an incredible, like, rounded cast, and how your acting background, I'm sure, like, helped you connect with them too.
Yeah, I like working with actors a lot. I think that's hopefully one of my it's definitely like it's just so comfortable for me because I've been in their shoes to a certain degree. But Maisie was I actually didn't know I knew of Nashville, but I had never seen the show. But I knew her from her like viral video with her sister. That was that Call Your Girlfriend song that they sang when they were super little. And I was sort of the same thing where I was like, wait, I was like, that girl is probably only 10 years old now, right? How much time has passed? And they're like, oh no, she's 18. It's like, what? Like, how old am I? So yeah, it was hard for me to connect the dots that was Maisie at first. But I met her initially because she auditioned for The Fallout. And we'd already cast Jenna, and she was reading for the role of Mia, which is funny because Maddie Ziegler is her best friend since she was 8 years old. And she was so good. I remember thinking like, oh fuck, she's so good, but she's just not right for Mia, and she's not any of these other characters, but she's so incredible. And I think at that point it was like, oh, it's the little girl from those videos. I was like, what the fuck? And then Maddie was like, oh yeah, and we're best friends in real life, which was so crazy in such a small world. But I had sort of kept her in the back of my mind. And then when Phineas, who scored The Fallout, we were talking and he was like, oh yeah, I've worked with Lennon, and Maisie actually was a big influence for Billie getting into music when she was a little kid, because she loved Maisie's videos. And there was a piece of music in the film that we were trying to figure out what to do. And they had posted like a 10-second clip, Lennon and Maisie, of a song were working on, and it was beautiful. And we were like, this would be so great in this section of the film. And so we just reached out to them and said, is this a finished song or what is this? And they were like, no, that's it. It's just 10 seconds. And we were like, well, would you finish the song for us if we wanted to put it in the movie? And they were like, yeah. And I remember they sent like 2 verses and a chorus just on their iPhone to Phineas and I. And we were like, oh my God, they're so good. Who are these like psycho weirdo geniuses? Like, this is just like the best song ever. And so it ended up being the end title sequence of the movie. And so but again, we never met because it was all the whole thing. Even Phineas and I, we just worked remote the whole time. And then I think I met her, maybe a year later through Maddie in person for the first time. And she's got this really special quality of somebody who's so cool and very, but has like such a sparkle and positivity to her, like this very indescribable joie de vivre, which I find and she's also like a child of the industry per se, but like doesn't have any of that on her. She just feels like a very normal, real, grounded human, and has this real maturity and wisdom, but then this real youthfulness at the same time. It's just a really interesting and hard to find magic combination. But that's really hard to then transfer that on screen. Not everybody can do that. Not everybody can take that part of themselves and like put it through words that aren't their words, aren't what they would say. So, we asked her to tape, but I'd hoped that she was going to be able to kind of infuse all those parts of her into Elliot. And not only was she able to do that, I mean, she just sort of like Elliot came to life all of a sudden when it was Maisie. I was like, oh, this is Elliot. And it was so funny because I was talking to her and she was like, it's so crazy. I was reading the script and I was like, I have a shitty boat that I bought on Facebook Marketplace. I also don't have my boating license and I crashed my boat yesterday. And there's all these weird, like, truths in Maisie's, reality that were so similar to Elliot. So she really connected to the character as well. And once I saw her tape, I was like, oh, this is the person. I could just only see her playing the role. And it was just so lucky that we had producers and financiers who were willing to cast younger Elliot first, and not have to cast the sort of star celebrity older version, and then cast around that, because younger Elliot's in every frame of the movie. It was so important that we find the right person and then cast around that. And it was just so such a gift that we got to really cast somebody totally fresh faced and unknown who was just so perfect for the part. And we didn't have to sort of rely on like, well, how many followers do they have on Instagram? Which has become the new, casting mandate, it seems like, for a lot of things. So
Yeah, it seems like when you have it's interesting you put that, because it's like you Aubrey Plaza is such a legend in itself, so you could think that she was cast first, but you in watching it, the only spoiler I'll give is like Macy is really like the that carries the film and is the star of the I mean, everybody's amazing, but it's like it's about it's her coming of age story. So that's so cool to hear. And so when you were casting for the adult version, who ended up being Aubrey, like what was that process? Were you guys like, because you could see it in the cheekbones, like you're like, oh yeah, they do kind of like have
I
a
mean, they don't look alike, but the irony was they don't look alike. And that's why I wrote in so many jokes about it. But what was funny is I was sort of in my own head about that. And after we cast Maisie and I'd written the role for somebody in their, like, I think it was like mid 50s or early 50s, I was like, we're putting photos next to each other. It's like, who's the best match? Who has blonde hair? Like all this dumb shit or whatever. And we just couldn't find the right person who was energetically a right match, who looked like Maisie and who was the right age and who was available. It was really hard to find that combination. And at a certain point, excuse me, we were getting down to the wire and I was like, who there was a list of people, like just actors. And I looked at the list and I saw Aubrey's name. And all of a sudden I could see the movie. I was like, it's so much funnier to me that this girl is not even 40 and she thinks she's so old, which was my reality hanging out with Maisie. Like I felt that way. And energetically, I couldn't explain it. But once you see the movie and their chemistry together, I could just imagine them being so hilarious and perfect together, which they were. And I thought, fuck it, it's such a buy-in. Like I love Aubrey. I'm a fan of hers. Maisie loved her. And I was like, I'm going to be so happy when the camera pans over and it's her sitting on that log that I can write in a few jokes about them not looking alike. And it's a buy-in. You either get into it or you don't. And if you walk away from the movie being caught up on the fact that they don't look alike, we've not done our jobs. And so far it hasn't bumped people once they've actually seen the movie. And they're just energetically such a great match. And so we basically just went out on a limb and sent it to her. And it's like, I hope she likes it, because we didn't have anybody else that we were really thinking about at that point. Because then I was just so stuck on the idea of it being her. And luckily she read it and she loved it. And we wrote in some jokes, some of which are in the trailer. And it's like, then you just move past it and you just hopefully love the characters and you're along for the journey. And it's not about like, wait, what's the logistics of how this works? How are they talking? Are they the same person? You love watching them together, which I do. Like, I think they're so great watching them together. The chemistry is amazing.
Yeah, I totally do. I think to the point that I'm like imagining, I see the eyes. If
Right?
if she had her hair, those cheeks, they're the same. Like, yeah, you're
Well, the
like
funny thing was, is
projecting.
Maisie had brown hair, and then we were like, do we want her to be blonde or brown? In the movie, we kept going back and forth, and then she's naturally a blonde, and we ended up going back to her natural color. And then we cast Aubrey, who has brown hair. We're like, fuck, we should have left your hair brown at the very least. But even that, we wrote in a joke, and it's like, who cares? Like, when a lot of people change their hair color 10 times,
I'd even say that change that lets you imagine it more. Like, oh yeah, you dye your hair when you're older and you keep up with it. So
Changes
yeah,
your
that's
entire bone structure. Yeah, it is what it is. But it really was the best thing that we ever did, because it really just, she felt like the tone of the movie. And
mm,
I'm such a fan of hers, and Maisie's such a fan. There's nothing like working with somebody who brings you so much joy and who is such a thrill to write for and to work with. Like, it just, everything happened for a reason, for sure.
and you can see that in Maisie, like you see that she has this kind of, teenage sarcasm, but it's really a shell. And you see that, like,
Totally.
that really, that chemistry, that same vibe, crosses across both actors. So
There's something,
yeah,
yeah, intangibly similar about them that's hard to explain, but I agree with you.
yeah. And that was really, refreshing to see in Maisie, because I don't know, you just, the last thing I saw her in, she was like a little girl. And so to see her all grown up, like, and,
I need to go
um,
back and rewatch it now. It's going to be such a trip.
I just, yeah, she's great seeing the two sisters together. So just about preparation, like when you were on set, did you do a lot of, did you do storyboards? Is that kind of like, or like mostly like you're blocking, you took a lot from your acting, and, I was just curious, like, just like from page to screen, sort of your directorial vision and how you built it, and in prep and on the set.
I'm only laughing at the storyboard thing because, like, we didn't storyboard at all for the Fallout. Me and my DP, Kristen Krell, and I worked with her again on this, and we were like, we're gonna storyboard this time, and we laughed because we did like one, and then we never did like one, literally one picture, and then we didn't do. The thing about us is we talk so much about it, and we take like pages and pages of notes, and we spend so much time at each location beforehand, and she takes a lot of like actual photographs of the places, so we do have we know what we want and we know what we need to get going into the prep. But I think it's because we had so little prep and so little in person, if any, actually, on the Fallout. I think we had literally none. Actually, I couldn't even go on the scouts, I remember, because of COVID restrictions. There was 2 people allowed only in most of the locations. And so I was like, you go with the whoever had to go inside the locations with her and take all the pictures and stuff, because, like, in terms of the camera movements and stuff, what you need. So there was so much trust that was built between us. And with this movie, it was the same thing. It's like half the movie is on boats, and there's only so much prep you can do for sort of what you're going to be able to plan for in terms of the elements, in terms of like all these follow boats and how things are, what's going to actually be behind them at the right moment. So we had to do a lot of prep in a certain way, but not traditional prep, I would say. It was tricky, and there was just a lot of trust and faith, and half the time we would be on follow boats and like run out of service, like, or we would be too far from the camera, or what was actually happening, and we'd like lose reception, and we'd be like, well, hope the scene's going well. But we'd planned for that with the actors, and they kind of knew to just keep going and to roll with it. And I think for me as a director, I try to just be really chill and know that every day nothing is going to go like how you plan it. It's just never ever going to happen that way, and if it does, it's a miracle. And so plan for the most flexibility ever, and know what you absolutely need to get to cut this scene together. And if you can get more than that, or if you have time to get crazy with things, great. But most of the time, you're just kind of dealing with all the things that you never thought were going to happen happening. So we created a pretty chill environment. But prep wise with the actors, I just spent a lot of time talking to them about the scenes and about all the things that could potentially go wrong, especially because there were so many people that it was their first time ever being in a movie. So instead of just running lines, and it was like, this is where we're going to film it, this is kind of how we want it to be, like talking through sort of like the intention of the scene and how we wanted to get some different versions of it and things like that. Is there anything in here that's bumping for you in terms of, I don't understand why I'm doing this, or I wouldn't say this joke like this, or can I add in this sort of moment? So it was a lot of just talking in terms of the actor prep and not like running lines. And then on the day, again, it's like everything, you have to go into it, get what you need to get, and then hope you have time. Because we're also dealing with like, there was like half the time there was not even a light put up because we were just dealing with natural elements. So it was like, okay, now we got to switch the direction. The sun's changing, and now we're filming everything this way. And I would say I owe so much of the credit to the DP, who is incredible, and also our editor, Jen Vecchiarello, who really saved the day on a lot of like, well, the sun's here, now the sun's there, and can we like cheat this and make it work? And she was a genius at kind of fixing some of those logistical things that we ran into. But a lot of flexibility is always needed, especially for movies like this.
And it also sounds like you know, prioritizing really the keep making sure that actors felt safe, like in a safe place, and felt comfortable, and like kept the focus on like what the scene was about. So
100%. And we would always get a few scripted takes and then do fun runs if we had time and just let them kind of, you know, go off book and do their thing, especially the stuff with Aubrey and Maisie. And yeah, it was just about, I think I learned the most about making movies once I'm in the edit, truthfully, because then you're really just like, the movie is one thing in a script, one thing when you're on set, and one thing in the edit, and it's so out of your control, especially when it's happening on set. I mean, when you're writing, it's much more in your control, but then the edit is sort of like dealing with the loss of what you maybe wanted to get, and also the thrill of what you actually did get, and really just like leaning, I think anyway, and like leaning into the strengths of what did the movie actually become once you got there, what were you actually able to get. And a good example is like the last shot of this movie was originally the opening shot in the script. And that's how much we were able to just take a step back and be like, what is this movie? Like, what's working? And I would say a lot of it is similar to the script, but there's some pretty big flip-flops we did throughout because it worked better.
Yeah, that's like what you said about staying flexible and open. So so for your last movie, I know that you spoke about what 4 or 5 films like felt as part of the inspiration. I don't know. I'm remembering Mustang being one, and like you, it was in an article I think you did for the Academy. So I'm curious for Mild Ass. Like, what were some of the films that may have inspired you, or if you had a little like, you know, movie camp that everybody had to watch? What were some like must watches for this
Well,
film?
the DP and I talked a lot about My Girl, and Now and Then being, and also Camp Nowhere. And I think that we really wanted something that felt as nostalgic and classic as possible, but still being really both visually and for all elements of the film. But those were 3 really big inspirations for us, in sort of that timeless sort of summer, you know, first love kind of feel. Yeah, it was interesting. We didn't like make the only movie Margot and I made Maisie watch was Blue Crush, but that was just unrelated. It's because she had never seen Blue Crush, and we were like, "What? that's a that's a classic. We need you to see that movie." Nothing to do with our movie, but she loved it. Yeah, no, there was like, I think like when I was making the movie, I thought a lot about Chris Columbus films. I think he is a director that has subtly influenced me more than probably any filmmaker. When I think about his movies, like everything from Mrs. Doubtfire to Stepmom to Home Alone, there's sort of this like really beautiful line he walks of films that are really heartfelt, and timeless and beautiful at the same time, and genreless. Like he kind of goes all over the place. And I just really admire his work and have been so influenced by it in such a deeply emotional way, especially when I think about like Stepmom. That's one of those ones for me that was so influential. Yeah, I think it was a combination of lots of different things, but I think My Girl was probably the number one that I kept going back to.
I love that. That was, I think that was the first movie I saw in theater as a
No
kid.
way.
Yeah, no, it was weird, funny because I wanted to see it, and then my older sister really wanted to see Beauty and the Beast, so we like bunny hopped. Like I made us see My Girl. I'm the younger sister, so and I was like, Macaulay Culkin, I love you. And then like, you know, she yeah. I mean,
And then it's funny because Petite Maman came out after. Who's again one of my favorite directors, Tomboy and Breathe are 2 of my other favorite movies. And it was so funny because obviously thematically has a lot of the same elements, but is so different. But I love that movie, and now would like call it like a weird inspiration for this movie, even though it came out after. But I love that movie thematically, is so beautiful and similar.
well, this has been such a pleasure. I have a quick rapid round, and then also just wanted to ask you how we can go out and watch Mild Ass, and support the film. Before that, I usually have this, but okay, I'll have it off my dome. What is your, so quick ones, what's your favorite film or favorite TV show of all time?
That's such an impossible question.
You can say for
Favorite-
now.
Pardon?
You could say like for now, like we won't hold it to you forever. It could be like today's feeling.
Okay, I'm going to say favorite movie of all time is The Sound of Music, just because it's classic for me, childhood classic. This is not a TV show, but this is a underrated TV special that Maisie and I are both obsessed with, is Cinnamon in the Wind by Kate Berlant. It's, please, everyone needs to watch that special.
Okay. I will have to check that out. I just saw her do the play at Pasadena Playhouse last year.
I'm obsessed with Kate Berlant.
She's great. Okay, favorite movie snack?
Ooh. I'm going to say chocolate peanut butter cups.
And if you weren't working in the film industry, what career do you think you would have pursued?
I think I would have liked to go into like psychology, maybe.
This has been so amazing, Megan.
Thank you for having me.
This has just been such a pleasure, and thank you for really like opening the vaults of your mind and the transparency of just like your process. Everybody listening, like go out and support this film. And just like go with your younger self, go with your older self, go with your family.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's good to see with friends or a date or your mom or dad. It's kind of honestly, yeah, don't let the title scare your parents away. I think they'll actually really enjoy it.
Oh yeah, not at all. This is like one for everyone. I loved My Girl, but I wouldn't like, you might be, you may not want to bring a date to My Girl. I don't know.
Exactly,
That's
me. Yeah, no,
but
My Girl's not a date movie for sure.
No. But yeah, this one's for everyone, honestly. So, yeah, thank you for being
it
on
comes
the
out in
podcast.
theaters September 13th in LA and New York, and I think Austin, and then it goes everywhere wide the following weekend.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for that. And like just thanks for being a part of the, like, also like an inspiration to see like a new wave of female filmmakers, like, that's like doing it all. Like I feel like like I feel like coming up in this industry, for me, it's like you used to see no one, and now it's just like seeing so many cool voices out there, and you're one of them. So
oh my gosh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Third and Fairfax. You can listen and subscribe to Third and Fairfax on Spotify, Apple, and Libsyn, and watch us on the Writers Guild of America West's YouTube channel. If you like this episode or have a comment, email us at podcast@wga.org. Also check out writtenby.com, the Guild's online publication, for more on writer craft, career, and union life. And see you next time.